When young, I did eagerly frequent doctor and saint, and heard much argument about it and about it all. But evermore came out by that same door wherein I went. Do you know why? Because it wasn't a question of understanding. It was a question of loving kindness. Something not of the thought of the head, but of the thought of the heart. You see, I didn't really like fishing. Well, I enjoyed fishing. I enjoyed the canals and the ponds and the farms and sitting by the water. But I didn't want to hurt the fish. The wise told me that they can't feel, they're cold-blooded, you know. I wasn't at all convinced. I just didn't know. You see, how I felt was more important than wisdom and not knowing. And so, how I felt had the upper hand. And I stopped fishing. I stopped killing wasps and ants too. In fact, in the end, I basically stopped hurting anything. Well, certainly deliberately. Even became vegetarian for that cause. Mum assured me, look, it'll ruin your health. Look at, I think she referred to George Bernard Shaw. You don't want to get crabby like him, do you? And anyway, the health, it'll wreck your health. So, I resolved that I'll take that risk. You see, the decision of my heart, the leading of my heart, rather, it's not quite like decision-making in the brain, in the mind, in the head. The heart actually apparently has the same high density of neurons as the brain in places, if not all of it, you know. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, an expert could tell you there's a lot of neurons in the heart, and they're not all just there to pump the thing and to coordinate the heart, you know. I experienced, without knowing it, the greater wisdom. That wisdom was not the answer. It was love that I valued. Loving kindness, which is an empathy, of course. Is it empathy? Sympathy? A concern for whatever way you put it. In short, a cup of verse, a loaf of bread, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness. Our wilderness, our paradise now. How's that go? A book of verse underneath the bough, a loaf of bread, a jug of wine, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness. Our wilderness, our paradise are now. You could say, well, jug of wine and loaf of bread sounds a bit like the great communion feast of the Christian religion. You could say that, but it was a practice long before Christianity. And in some ways, of course, it's basic to certain staple diet in some, especially Middle Eastern regions. But either way, such meal, such feasting, such communion speaks of communion, fellowship, good intent, harmony between one another. It's a taste of heaven. That's the whole point of the communion. The company of the communion transforms you, be it in bodily form of those present, in spirit form of God, our Heavenly Father. Thank you, Heavenly Dad, for the importance of love is greater than wisdom. And I was going to say even, but especially the least able among us. Like your dog, or the cat you've rescued, may have very little in the way of understanding, but tremendous love and devotion to you. Isn't that wonderful? Christian religion has sought to, I was going to say capitalize, that's unkind, but to learn from this that if, for instance, I convince you of desperate sin and your desperate plight facing eternal damnation, and then rescue you with such by the eternal sacrifice of Christ, his blood in pagan Canaanite terms, well, you'll be so relieved that you'll pledge yourself to him forevermore and love him to bits. The trouble is, and I hesitate to actually say that word, the trouble is that your view of God may then be somewhat questionable and questioning why he should have to allow such a dilemma in the first place. And the answer is, you have this problem because you have not read more closely the Jesus story, as opposed to Pauline teaching. Or you would know that God is not just Almighty God, but loving Heavenly Dad, from which you should realize that you're a child. And the children need to grow up and to learn to be an adult if they're to have a full and stable adult life in the society they're in. And the one that truly you need to be in is the society of heaven, the family of God. Adults fellowshipping with each other, including, of course, God, our Heavenly Father, our Dad. When you get that right, well, at least much of the questioning starts to evaporate. Through sheer understanding, but then the questioning was question of understanding as well, wasn't it? It was all mind stuff. But the gospel story of Jesus, I'd be safer not to mention the word gospel. That has bad connotations now from the Christian religion, but a bit like the word crusade. Oh my goodness, that had bad connotations. So I'll say simply the Jesus story, understanding. And I'm thinking very much of John's Gospel. In fact, I'm narrowly focused on John 17, as you know, perhaps. perhaps. And then you would know the heart of the matter, which is that it's a question of heart, relationship, loving kindness. But you didn't need to know that. You just needed to know there was something wrong about fishing. And you didn't like to be the fish you were catching and perhaps hurting. And that is why you're in the kingdom of heaven. From your point of view, given you're applying your mind, your understanding. But from God's point of view, it's because he delights in you, his child, why you exist, and why you will live forever in fullness of life. Because of his loving kindness, his being, who he is, and now who you are. Bless you. Thank you, Dad.